always loved the unique engine builds, and this 427 cubic inch small block features a fully polished 8-stack fuel injection system I've never been able to get my hands on before. In the old days, Ingley's mechanical fuel injection was found on just about every sprint car engine that hit the track. Ingley's eventually got bought out by other companies and unfortunately was eventually shut down. But the good news is Jim Ingley started a brand new company called Jim Ingley's 8-stack systems that are now more oriented for street applications. They are pretty high end, and when Keith Dorton at Automotive Specialist told me he was using one on an engine build for a show car, I knew I had to document this engine going together. The basic idea for this build is to keep the classic look of an old school small block, but maximize torque and horsepower by bumping it all the way out to 427 cubic inches. Now, that's a lot easier said than done if you're going to stick with the standard 9.025 inch high deck on the block. And if you're curious about just how much trouble it can be, check out my older video that goes into more detail about squeezing that much bore and stroke into a small block, and you can see that here. Believe me, it's tougher than you think sometimes. When I got to this project, Keith had already screwed together the short block. But let me tell you what we've got going on here. A cast iron Dart SHP block makes it possible to run 4-inch 125 thousandth cylinder bores to go along with a 4-inch stroke to get those 427 cubic inches. Squeezing in that additional half-inch of stroke does require a bit of clearancing work along the pan rails like you see here, so that the rod bolts don't clang into the block. But it could easily be done with a handheld die grinder. The crank and rods are both from Molnar Technologies, and the H-beam connecting rods are 5 inches 850 thousandths long from center to center, which allows Dorton to squeeze in all that extra stroke into a stock deck height block. The Dart SHP block, by the way, is also really nice because it means you can have a modernized small block brand new for a reasonable cost and get some really useful upgrades like the splayed 4-bolt main caps. On the other end of the rotating assembly are a set of Molle forged pistons. The combination of the valve reliefs and the dish on the top of the pistons total up to 16 cc's to keep the compression ratio a manageable 10.5 to 1, even with all that extra stroke. Keeping a performance engine happy on 91 octane is always a nice touch. So anyway, that's the rotating assembly. Sorry I didn't get you the blow-by-blow of it all going together, but you get the idea. The camshaft is a solid roller ground by Mike Jones of Jones Cam Designs. Jones is a small custom shop near us that does a lot of high-performance cams. Anyhow, the cam is ground to open the valves with 250 degrees of duration for the intakes at 50 thousandths tappet lift, and 258 for the exhaust. Lobe lift for both the intakes and exhaust is 410 thousandths, and the center line is at 112 degrees. Keith puts a little assembly lube on the Torrington bearing that's part of the timing set kit from Cloy's. It's actually a pretty cool piece of kit that allows cam timing adjustments with the chain still in place thanks to the cammed adjuster. The billet timing cover is also from Cloy's and comes with an indexable cam stop for dialing in camshaft inplay. That can easily be done with just a screwdriver. Then, when Dorton has it exactly where he wants it, the adjuster is locked down with an external bolt that also serves to keep dirt and moisture out of the assembly. And now on to the bottom side of the engine. This is a wet sump system, and after installing the milling oil pump, Keith adds a little assembly lube to the pump internals to help it prime right away. The pickup and pan are both from Mylodon, and I love what they do here. Notice the strap just over the pickup spring? That assures that the pickup will never get mashed against the floor of the oil pan if it bangs up against something and starve your engine of oil. And here's a look at the pan in Mylodon's signature gold. The deep sump pan has both a scraper and a windage tray to maintain good oil control and minimize windage. And here you can see that a couple of spacers were needed to move the Wyand water pump out a bit so it clears the billet aluminum timing cover from cloys. You may also notice that the block now has a coat of paint. It's actually just a protective coat of primer. This engine will be going into a high-end hot rod, and the car builder plans to do one of those fancy professional paint jobs where everything matches the car. So for now, it's just gray. Keith uses a set of SCE multi-layer steel head gaskets for the build to seal the combustion chambers. The compressed thickness, once everything is all bolted up, will be 39 thousandths thick. Next up, cylinder heads. These are AFR's fully CNC cut small block heads to ensure plenty of flow to the combustion chambers. The valves are sized at 2 inches 50 thousandths for the intakes and 1 inch 600 for the exhaust, and the chambers are sized at 65 cc's. So, as I may have already mentioned, that will make the compression ratio right at 10.5 to 1. The 23-degree Chevy heads have also been outfitted with 195 cc intake runners. So, at 550 thousandths valve lift, the heads are rated for 280 CFM through the intakes and 218 through the exhausts. Those exhaust ports, by the way, have also been raised 100 thousandths of an inch to help produce that flow, but they'll still accept standard exhaust headers. On the top side, the springs are from PAC with steel locks and retainers. Cylinder head specialist Jeff Dorton has used 70 thousandths thick shims so that the valve springs have 175 pounds of pressure on the seat and 420 open. Securing the heads to the block are a set of ARP head bolts. They are torqued to 70 pounds in 3 steps. The solid roller lifters are, as you can probably see, from Morel. They connect to a set of 5/16 push rods that are 7 inches 800 thousandths long. Seven 16th inch rocker studs mount up the aluminum rocker arms. They are the stock 1.5 to 1 ratio, so that will make the gross valve lift 615 thousandths of an inch for both the intakes and the exhausts. Keith sets the cold lash to 9 thousandths for the intakes and 11 for the exhausts. Finally, we're at the part of the video you've been waiting for, that crazy Ingles individual runner intake with EFI. Now this polished intake system is definitely a beaut. It gives the look of old school individual runner Weber carbs, but with all the advantages that come from port fuel injection. This small block system, besides the absolutely gorgeous full polish, cleverly hides the injectors underneath the polished fuel rails between the stacks. That stand underneath the injectors is the capstan wheel, which takes the throttle input and uses it to open all 8 butterflies at the same time. Those beautiful air horns are all CNC cut from billet aluminum and available in a variety of sizes in case you're trying to get everything to fit underneath your hood without cutting a hole in it. The assembly will be controlled by a Holley Terminator ECU. Now, the advantage of an individual runner intake system like this is without the large plenum between the throttle body and the intake runners, like on a conventional intake manifold, the throttle response is quicker and more responsive. Low end torque is also maximized. And if there's a weakness of the individual runner intake system, especially on a Chevy small block like we have here, is that they have paired up 4 pairs of intake runners. So they're right side by side and space is really limited. That means no matter how large you make the throttle bodies, the intake runners still have to neck down and make some pretty difficult turns to get to the intake ports in the cylinder heads. Ideally, you would want the air and fuel flow path to be as straight as possible. And that's just not going to happen with paired intake ports like the small block Chevy. Not a big deal when it comes to making low end torque, but it can become a bottleneck if you're trying to produce ultimate horsepower. We're almost ready to get this bad boy on the dyno, but first we've got to have a cam sensor. It slots in the place of a traditional distributor and works much the same. To minimize wear with the steel camshaft, Keith swaps out the standard cam gear on the MSD unit for a softer bronze one. You can see here how there's really not any room for a traditional distributor and cap with the runner layout anyway. And with the cast valve covers in place, we're ready to hear this thing run. The fuel is fed by 8 57 pound-per-hour injectors. We found during wide open throttle dyno pulls, they were running at 55% duty cycle according to the Holley engine control software. Oh, I forgot to mention, this is an individual coil setup when it comes to the ignition. For the dyno test, the coils are just mounted on a rack, but in the car, they'll be set up on the firewall somewhere, nice and clean. If you wanted, there are also plenty of valve cover options where you can mount the coils on the valve covers like an LS. After a little tuning, we were ready to let her rip. Starting the pull at 4,500 RPM, we saw peaks of 571 foot-pounds of torque at 4,700 RPM and 566.5 horsepower at 5,900. Running an engine at low RPMs on the dyno can be very damaging, so that's why we started at 4,500 RPM. But the strength of this engine is obviously in how much torque it's going to make in the low RPM band. The torque line shows that it wouldn't drop below 500 pounds well into the 3,000 RPM range. Now, it's true that if you wanted to make that big horsepower number, you could do as well and probably much better with a conventional intake setup. Actually, Keith tells us that this engine package is capable of making well in excess of 600 horsepower with a single plane intake and a properly sized carburetor. But that's not really the point here. Besides looking like $1 million, this engine will crank in every season, give no trouble, and absolutely squall the tires right off of idle. That's a combo I can get behind. Hey, thanks for watching. Leave a comment whether you prefer individual runner EFI or a more traditional setup, and we'd also certainly appreciate a thumbs up. See you next time, and keep your foot in the throttle.